this session when we opened K-5. Great Hearts originally started grades 6 through 12. And so we junior high, high school, one of the pinnacle things we chose from very early on was the seminar as a pinnacle piece of our curriculum, right? Literature seminars, great books seminars, especially in grades 9 through 12. And so that's what most people thought of as the Socratic Method, the way it played out in seminar classes. When we opened our K-5s, we got a lot of questions from those elementary school teachers. Say, okay, so we're still a classical school. We use many of the same pedagogies, but what does that look like with these younger kids? And are you really asking me to run seminars on Aristotle with my 5-year-olds? No. We don't think that's appropriate, right? The joke that we have is, yes, no, it is more appropriate for them to play with Play-Doh than to read Plato. And so we still have to think, how are we committed to a common set of teaching principles, common set of pedagogy, K-12, even if it might look different across disciplines and across grade levels? But how are we committed to the same principles? And I would argue that is something, if you're a school leader or if you're a lead teacher at your school, one of the great things about classical schools, I would say, is that they are principled and practiced. That we don't stay up in theoretical clouds and just spout philosophy and not tie it down to anything, but also when we are practical, when we make lesson plans, when we make solid decisions in the classroom, we realize that they have to be tied back up to our philosophy. We have to make intentional decisions down at the practical level in a way that fits with our overall vision. All schools have a philosophy. It's just whether you're intentional about that or not. So we would say that we are committed to a Socratic method of teaching across our schools, across our grades, and across our disciplines. What we want to look at today is what might that look like, especially in our youngest classrooms, if it's not seminar. Well, one of the things that we're going to talk about today is one of the most important things that you can do in a Socratic classroom is to start with an experience of the thing itself. We're going to start by experiencing the thing itself, and that will drive the lesson. So, to follow my own principle, rather than starting with a definition of Socratic teaching, we're just going to watch an example. We have, this is actually a video from our teacher training that we do with our teachers every summer. This is one of our great school leaders here working with our teachers, but she is demonstrating a 2nd grade music lesson. And again, so you might say, oh, I came here and I thought we were going to talk about literature circles using the Socratic method. We're not. We're actually going to talk about the Socratic method in disciplines that are not literature. And we're going to start with music. So enjoy your own learning as we sing a little bit and start to notice things about rhythm and patterns.
Since there are a lot of you and this room is quite intense, I'm going to ask you to be really soft and keep the beat on your lap with me. You ready? Rocky Mountain, Rocky Mountain, Rocky Mountain high. When you're on that Rocky Mountain, hang your head and cry. Do, 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 remember me. Do, 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 remember me. Beautiful, you did that so well. Thank you so much. This is, for you teachers, a 2nd grade lesson, and so there is some information that my students would already know. You've already identified one of those things. They would already know that the beat is steady. Stay with me. Beat is steady. Beautiful. And you were able to pick that out very quickly. Nice job. The other thing that my students would have known by the 2nd grade is that rhythm is a little bit different. Rhythm is the way the words go. 2 fingers, palm of your hand, do it with me. Rhythm is the way the words go. So, now that you know that, will you also do the rhythm with me in your hands? When you pick it up, Sing along. Don't be embarrassed. Ready? Rocky Mountain, Rocky Mountain, Rocky Mountain high. When we're on that Rocky Mountain, hang your head and cry. Do, 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 remember me. Do, 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 remember me. You're doing a really great job. The other thing that my students would already know is the song. Before we got to this particular portion and what I'm going to do with you today, they would have great familiarity and this would be super easy. But we're going to take a few extra minutes. I want to be really cognizant of our time and help you with the song. Okay? So sing after me. All of you. Sit up nice and tall. Rocky Mountain, Rocky Mountain, Rocky Mountain high. What does the word after mean? Think about it. Sing after me. Rocky Mountain, Rocky Mountain, Rocky Mountain high. Rocky Mountain, Rocky Mountain, Rocky Mountain high. When you're on that Rocky Mountain, hang your head and cry. When you're on that Rocky Mountain, hang your head and cry. The words are here. Do, 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 remember me. Do, 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 remember me. Do, 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 remember me. Your turn. Do, 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 remember me. You're quick. Nice job. Now, I'm going to ask you to compare and contrast. So I'm going to ask this side of the room, will you please keep the beat quietly in your laps? Remember, there's a lot of us. And keep your eye turned over here, because this side of the room, I'm going to ask you to do the rhythm with me. Keep your eye focused so that you are seeing what they're doing with the beat and what they are doing with the rhythm. Are you ready? Can you do it? 1, 2, ready, here we go. Rocky Mountain, Rocky Mountain, Rocky Mountain high. When you're on that Rocky Mountain, hang your head and cry. Do, 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 remember me. Do, 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 remember me. That was awesome. Now switch. Beat, and you are what? I'm sorry? Beautiful. 1, 2, ready, go. Remember me. You're faster than I planned, so I'm going to test you. Have you seen what I've been able to do here? I've been keeping the beat where? In my feet. And I've been putting the rhythm where? Can you do that with me? Sure. Well, I know. 1, 2, let's start the beat. Everybody, here we go. Remember me. Give yourselves a very quiet, silent cheer because you did a beautiful job. Now, you know the beat. You know the rhythm. The other thing that my students, my second graders, would already know is that a quarter note in stick notation looks just like that, a stick, like a 1, and it equals 1 beat. They would already know that 2/8 notes with the connecting beam, stick notation, because I'm going to use that later and you need to know that, also sit together inside 1 beat. So if we look at the phrase, which is the third phrase that we're actually singing, do, 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 remember me. How many beats are in that phrase? Take a minute to do it silently in your head. If you have an answer, please put your hand in the air. If you know how many beats are in that phrase. Let's do it once together and see if you were right. Ready? Here, just on do, ready? Do, 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 remember me. Can you show me on your fingers? How many beats are there total in that phrase? Oh, I'm seeing a couple different answers. Let's put our beats in. Let's put our beat on our shoulder. That way we can all see you, because I can't quite see all of you. Beats right here. Just that one phrase. Here we go. Have your neighbor count yours. Ready? Do, 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 remember me. How many did we get? Everybody? Oh, yay. And I would go through this. Sing the phrase with me as I put little lines, and these lines are going to signal the beat. That's what they're going to stand for, is the beat. Ready? 1, 2, do. Here we go. Do, 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 do. Do remember me. Do I have 8 red lines that are going to signify the 8 beats of this phrase? Phew, good thing. Now, let's put the rhythm up there. How many sounds, musical sounds, did you hear when we sang this first word, do? Do. 1. Which note belongs in that beat? Oh, you're so smart. The quarter note. Remember, I'm using stick notation. I don't draw the note heads. Can someone figure out the rest of this first half of our phrase? 4 big beats. Let's sing it once together. Ready? Do, 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 do. Who can tell me how am I going to fill in these next 3? I heard a lot of 1, 1, 1, 1. I'm going to remind you that in my music class, those are not ones, those are notes. Who knows which note belongs there? I heard it. A quarter note. Beautiful. Does anyone disagree? Excellent. Now, we're going to move down to that second half of the phrase. So let's sing the whole phrase one more time, just to keep it in our heads. We have a few moments. Ready? Here we go. Do, 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 do remember me. Okay, so this first beat, let's stop after we've sung just this first beat. And then you're going to tell me, how many sounds do you hear? Ready? Here we go. Do, 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 do re. How many musical sounds did you sing? How many musical sounds did you sing? Talk to your neighbor and tell them why. Thank you. Who has an answer they'd be willing to share with us? I apologize, I don't know many of your names. Yes, sir. Oh, 6? You heard 6 sounds. Tell me about those 6 sounds. Oh, 6 sounds total from when we started. So 1, 2, 3, 4 sounds. So he says we have a total of 6, which means how many belong in this beat? 2. Okay, so we have 2 sounds inside this beat. Did anyone get a different answer? So you agree that there are 2 sounds that belong in that beat. Are those the quarter notes? Can I put 2 quarter notes inside one beat? No, I can't. What notes belong in there if I have 2 sounds that fit inside one beat? 8 notes. Thank you. Sing it with me. Do, 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 remember. Uh-oh. What's happening in this beat? Another pair of 8th notes, because we have 2 sounds or 2 syllables. These are second graders. They would know what a syllable is. It works for them. Do, remember. Excellent. One more time. Sing the whole thing with me right here. Ready? Do, 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 remember me. What's happening there at the end? I would like someone to raise their hand and tell me what's happening here. When you are singing this song to the end of this phrase, what's happening? Yes, sir. We are holding this sound, the sound of the word me, for 2 beats. Beautiful. How am I going to write that? How do I notate this? Please. I'm sorry, what? Half. I only have to draw half of the note? Say that one more time. I draw a quarter note, but I leave space inside of that note head? Like that? Oh, I've never seen that before. How many of you have seen that before? Oh, I'm so glad. You've seen that before. How many beats did 2 eighth notes get, everyone? How many beats does 1 quarter note take? So would it be possible for me to have a note that takes these 2 beats? It's possible? So I have this beautiful note here. Uh-oh. Where do I put it? I have two beats. And the composer needs, I'm sorry, say that again? Connect them like this. But now I count 3 beats. 1, 2, 3. So remember, we're not going to change our beats. We still have 4 beats in this phrase, in this half of phrase, I should say. Good idea. Thank you for being brave. Please. Draw the half note in the first blank, because that's where the word is, right? Me falls right here, and I need to know exactly how long I'm going to hold this word. Should I put something in there? No. Why not? It speaks for itself. This half note is taking up how many beats? How many beats? You just learned a new note. Congratulations. Give yourself a silent cheer. I said a silent cheer.
All right, so other than wishing you were back in 2nd grade so you could have Miss Piper as a music teacher, turn to your neighbor and just talk about what did you observe, especially if we're going to say this is a good example of a Socratic lesson. Then what characteristics do you see here that we might apply as a pattern? Turn to your neighbor and talk about what you saw. All right, we're going to come back in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's just take a couple short observations. What did you notice about that lesson? What did she do? Okay, so there's certainly questions there. We'll have to figure out why were they effective. But what else do you see? What do you mean repetition? Yeah, coming back to that shared experience. We're going to use that phrase again and again here. A shared experience among students. To get to new knowledge, we must start in the same place together. So we keep referring back to that as many times as possible. So it's fresh, it's right there, it's shared. And then I'm going to ask you to push your knowledge a little bit further. Anything else? Yeah. Yes, right? So again, there was something concrete there. You're not pulling kind of knowledge out of nowhere, but we are going somewhere that we may not have known before. What was her objective of this lesson? What did she want students to know? A half note. We're introducing the half note. Did she start with the definition of a half note? What did she start with? Yeah, something that they already know, right? The experience. Just the joy of singing. What a great song. So we'll get there. We'll get to our objective. We will get to a definition. We will get to tie down knowledge. But how we get there will make all of the difference. So again, very briefly, as we talk about the Socratic Method today, especially in the K-5 context, I want to pull it out of some things that I find are misconceptions, right? That folks say it can only really happen in the context of seminar. Seminar is perhaps a pinnacle place where conversation and discovery and inquiry can happen, but it does not have to only happen in those spaces or around literature and great books. It does not only have to happen in your older grades. And I will say in this case, people say, yeah, but how do you apply it to something so concrete as science or math or music where kids have to know, real things? Aren't those discussions really for questions that really can't be answered? We would argue no. No, the beauty of the Socratic approach is that we come to knowledge of real things through conversation. So how we're going to get there, though, is very important. This is a small note I like to make as we wrestle with what the concept of classical education is. I find that there are two ways in which sometimes people expect different things when they come to a Great Heart School and they hear that we are a classical school. On the one hand, they might say, okay, well, I went to your school and I saw that your lower grades are in, rows and columns. You look like a very traditional school. You're a core knowledge school, so they learn a lot of facts and knowledge. So got it. You're one of those traditional schools. And so you must just really drill them all the time. It must be, rigorous, and you drill them with a lot of facts, a lot of content knowledge, and push them to make sure that they can, soar on the SATs and things like that. Right? We would say, really the right description of what we're going after here. The problem with the fact cramming lecture, the drill and kill, is that it puts these little factoid knowledge bits as the end of education, which probably isn't really helpful considering I can get pretty much access to any factoid I want on a digital device at any time. So I don't really see why that's particularly helpful. So we're not just going to drill and kill and just push facts without discovery. But on the other hand, sometimes when people say, wait, so you use the Socratic method, you must be inquiry-based. So are you one of those schools, again, where students kind of learn whatever they want, right? Or they pursue any sort of knowledge that they want, that they get to define truth for themselves? Are you going to be in kind of pods and kids can pick their objective for the day? Well, no. Actually, when you walk into our classrooms, you're going to see a teacher at the helm, guiding students. It's one conversation. It's going to look more like a traditional classroom. We often like to say that we are not what a lot of people would say student-centered. Right? Student-centered often means kind of student is the driver of even of truth, of kind of defining what their own truth is. And so we're not quite student-centered, but we're not just teacher-centered, where it's the sage on the stage and they have to be the end-all, be-all, and it's authoritarian. We say we're truth-centered. We're truth-centered. At the end of the day, our classrooms ought to be about having teachers introduce students to a pursuit of common truth together. And so the teacher doesn't, withhold all of the information in a guess what I'm thinking game. But they don't let the students go off wherever they want and define truth however they want. But we will help students pursue that common understanding of truth through habits of inquiry around shared experience. The poet Edna St. Vincent Millay gives us a good reminder for how to balance this idea of inquiry and facts. She says, as she's lamenting the world that she sees, upon this gifted age, in its dark hour, falls from the sky a meteoric shower of facts. They lie unquestioned, uncombined. Wisdom enough to leach us of our ill is daily spun, but there exists no loom to weave it into fabric. There's a lot of information available to us in this digital age. But where is the wisdom that brings out the beauty and the patterns which together these form wisdom and the way of pursuing a good life? That's what Edna St. Vincent Millay is going to challenge us to do, is to find the loom. How do we weave these things together so that knowledge becomes wisdom? The Socratic Method, that is because Siri is incapable of pursuing wisdom. Thank you, we planted that. So at the risk of reducing an art to a definition, which we would not want to do, we will throw some words up for consideration for today as we think about what it means to teach in the Socratic Method. We would call Socratic teaching a process, a long process, a hard process of guiding students. Socrates calls rhetoric a certain guiding of the soul, psychagogia. And teachers, like rhetors, guide our students to an end goal. We have a purpose, we have an objective, we have a plan. We want students to come to understanding of real things. But the way we get there is through carefully planned observation, narrative, storytelling, pulling out the drama, and strategic use of questions. If our guide is Socrates, yes, he uses questions, yes, it's in conversation, yes, it looks spontaneous, and we don't know where the end is going to be. But remember, we got the Socratic dialogues through Plato, who wrote them down and carefully crafted the conversations. That's how we got this knowledge. So we think about this carefully crafted conversation. We want the teacher to think about themselves, if we're a guide of students, think about literally being a nature guide. Think about if you were to take your students on a hike through nature. You could just keep them back in the classroom and list off a whole bunch of facts about Yellowstone. Or if you could, wouldn't you rather walk with them through the space? And you would have to plan a beginning point and an ending point. But you don't blindfold them and just cram them full of facts. You walk with them, you let them look, you let them explore. Heaven forbid for a second you let them wander for a second. And notice how the light hits the rock and think about it. So we guide our students through this space in a way that teaches them to walk alongside us in the learning process. So as we think about how to do that, we want to think, what does it take to plan a Socratic lesson? How do we set up the topic in a lesson to cultivate that wonder, to set up observation and inquiry? And then how can we use our questions effectively? We're just going to go through a couple brief points here that might help us wonder ourselves about what it looks like to do this. So the plan. How do we think about planning for a classroom that would look like this? A couple tips when we think about planning. We'll start with an example of a plan that you might have to create. In third grade, our students learn about the Vikings. It is a thrilling topic for 8-year-olds to think about plundering. If you were to plan a lesson on the Vikings and take that voyage, the question for you is, where would you start your planning process? How do you, as a teacher, put yourself in the mode of wonder and curiosity and start to design questions for your students? Well, there's a couple different places that teachers might start. They might start by looking at the state standards. Now, I will tell you that most state standards don't actually care about whether students learn about the Vikings. We do. And so the state standards may have some good places to look for what our objectives for the lesson might be, but they're not going to be sufficient for us. The state standards, we, as charter schools, we are beholden to them. We want them to know certain knowledge. We want them to have certain skills. We want them to do well on state tests. That is not our full end goal in the purpose of education. They serve that higher goal, but they are not the higher goal. And if we are to cultivate the right kinds of lessons for our students, we need to ensure that this is not the end point, but it is an important part. Don't hear me. I'm not dismissing the role of state standards, but it does not capture all of the goals we have for our students. Do we just start with a textbook? Do we just kind of go chapter by chapter, topic by topic? Does the textbook define what our end goal is? Or are we really worried students are going to be interested? So what we really got to make sure is by the end, what is our classroom celebration so that we grab Viking boats that are made of toothpicks or something, right? Just to get the kids interested. I would argue that these are not the three places where we prepare for wonder with our students. If we want to prepare to cultivate the curiosity, the inquiry, the questions where students have to figure out what's going on, we remind ourselves of why we're studying this in the first place. So you might start with the end goal of a history unit. So on the history unit for the Vikings, we want to understand how and why the Vikings, as a people group, leave their homes to explore new places. That could be a goal for the unit. You start with the end in mind. Where are we going? We're going on a journey. We have an end goal. How do I backwards design? Many of you have heard that text, Understanding by Design. Backwards design from your end goal. But remember that your end goal of your unit is placed in a bigger goal. It's third grade history, and third grade history explores a series of goals that are related to why we study history in the first place. If you want your students to wonder about your topic, you yourself have to think, why is it important for the human soul to study history? Think about that for yourself, and I think you'll come up with some interesting questions. Now, we're going to talk about what the right level of question is for your students, but as you design your individual lessons, think through what is the thread, what are the patterns that we start to see in this discipline that I can start to play with. Vikings strike out for new land and new exploration. Guess what? In third grade history we start to find other people groups that do that similarly. Is there a pattern to human behavior that we can start to notice in this lesson? The students will pick up on and start to observe. One other note as we get into talking about introduction and questions in this session, people will often ask, well, what is a typical structure of a lesson for you all when you're thinking about Socratic teaching? So here's our 5 basic components. They might look a little bit different discipline to discipline, but very experienced teachers, this will look very familiar to you, right? There's often a warm-up, bell work, right? Some sort of practice that students need to do. There's an introduction to the lesson itself, reinforcement, and closure. It's a common structure for a lesson, but we want to spend a couple minutes the role of these 2 things. What I'll often find if a teacher says, okay, I need to get through this objective, we need to understand the definition of a half note, how I'm going to start my lesson is introduce our objective, introduce the definition of a half note, make sure that you practice half notes, give you a worksheet, and we're done. What we're going to talk about is, what do you do here that will build the patterns of inquiry and keep students asking the right kinds of questions? So we're going to get to student practice in our lessons. Students will have to know definitions and terms and be able to apply algorithms, but what happens here in the setup of that is going to be incredibly important. So let's look at an example of a lesson, a science lesson about the digestive system. So what I want you to do is you watch this, and it's about 7 minutes. Think about, what is the teacher's goal for this lesson? This is one of the very first introductions they have to the unit of the digestive system. So what do you observe? How is this an introduction? How does she choose to introduce the topic of the digestive system? And then if you notice anything about how she uses questions to drive the lesson, we will observe that also.
first start today by having an experiment. And I am going to need somebody up here to help. But I'm going to give a cracker to Kemper. And I want you to watch what he is doing, okay? I want you to watch his face. I want you to watch his mouth. I want you to watch his teeth. First, when you first take a bite, I want you to tell us how it tastes. Salty, sweet, spicy, bitter. No, give me a flavor. Like, describe the flavor of it, okay? So right when you first start chewing, then we're going to watch him, and then he's going to tell us more about how it tastes. Does that sound good? Yeah. Okay, so you think a little bit bitter and salty. Okay, so you keep chewing for a while. Now, class, I want you to watch him, Kemper. While you're chewing, don't swallow. I want you to chew your cracker. I want you to walk up this middle aisle so everyone can kind of have a good look at Kemper while he's eating. He said it's bitter and salty. What is he doing? What is happening? Evan.
He was kind of like his jaw was going down and then up and then down.
Okay, so his jaw was going up and down. Okay. Up and down. Did anybody else notice anything? Remember, Kemper, don't swallow. Yes.
His face kind of looked a little strange.
Well, because you were all staring at him. But let's think about what was happening. What was happening? What part of his body was he engaging? His mouth, okay. Very good. Now, before you swallow, I'm going to ask you a question. You didn't swallow, did you? How does it taste now? Does it still taste salty and bitter, or has it changed? I want you to open your mouth and show them what it looks like. Can everybody see what it looks like?
No.
Okay, go ahead, walk around. Let everyone take a good look.
This kid is living his best life.
Okay, Kemper, come back up here. You can swallow. So did everybody see what it looks like in his mouth?
Yes.
Now I'm going to ask you something. Can I see your cracker? When he opened his mouth, did it look the same as this?
No.
No. Well, how did it look? Abby, how did it look?
It looks kind of soggy and
Okay, so let's see. The cracker, it looked soggy. Okay, do we have any other words? How's it look, Amelia? Slimy. Okay, that's a good description. Good. What else? Jaw going up and down. How jaw goes up and down. Everybody do that. Make your jaw go up and down. What are you doing?
chewing.
You're chewing. Very good. And when you chew, you are using your what? Your mouth. I'm glad you said that. Your teeth, and your teeth are in your what? Mouth. So he was using his teeth. Now, I have a question for you. He used his teeth, and what did his teeth do to this cracker? What did it? Yeah, it broke it. And so, did it stay the same size?
No.
So what did the teeth do?
Make it get smaller.
It
They made it get smaller.
Right.
Break it in half.
So it broke the cracker, right? And it made it what? What did we say it made it? Smaller, right? Made it smaller. Excellent. Now, I have a question for you. When you are eating something, your teeth are chewing, but does something else happen inside of your mouth? Tabitha? Yeah, so you're chewing it with your teeth, and then something happens, Logan.
Probably your cheeks are moving.
Yeah, your cheeks are moving, they're part of your mouth area. Alakai?
Your tongue has taste buds and they taste.
Very good, she said your tongue. Okay, so our tongue is in there. Very good. Let's make sure I spell this one. Yeah, I always have a hard time with that one. Your tongue, and you said it tastes it, right? And we talked about taste. What did he say it tasted like first? It tasted bitter and salty, but then a couple minutes later I said, how does it taste now? And he said, sweeter. Okay? I wonder how that happens. What do you think happens? Try to think. Okay, if you have a piece of food in front of you and you're really, really hungry and you're looking at that food, before you are about to eat or you see something tasty, mine does. Okay. What is that? Is it water? Is there water pouring out of my mouth? No? Abby, what is it?
Saliva?
Saliva. Very good. Now, does everybody know what saliva is?
I don't.
Lily.
I know what saliva is because it's another word for spit.
It's another word for spit. So, there are two things that are working in your mouth, right? So, we talked about our teeth. The teeth are making it smaller, right? And the saliva or the spit is doing something to it. Is it making it smaller too? What could it be doing? Max.
You can be getting it wetter and wetter.
Okay.
So it makes your tongue easier and it helps you eat.
Excellent. He said it gets wetter and wetter and wetter, and it breaks it apart so it's easier for you to eat. Would it be easy if I just grabbed this cracker and I just sat it in my mouth and I tried to swallow it?
No.
What would that feel like, Tabitha?
You would feel like something stuck in your throat.
It would feel like it was stuck. Do you think if I swallowed it like this could actually fit down my throat?
No.
No, it probably couldn't. So our teeth and our spit and our saliva, they're working together to make it smaller.
All right. Anybody who argues that classical education is stuffy and too serious, come hang out. All right, so turn with your partner, talk about what you observed, how she introduced the topic, and maybe some things about how she used questions. All right. Now we're going to move on to the demonstration. I'm going to have somebody, no, that's not true. Adults are not nearly as interested in doing this kind of thing. They think it's weird. They call HR, and I am HR, so that does not work. All right, so give us a couple observations about what you saw about that lesson. What was the lesson goal? Does anybody want to take a stab at that? What do you think her objective was written down in her lesson plan for that day? Okay, to be able to name saliva and its purpose in the human body. Anything else? Are there other objectives? There could be. Sorry, go ahead. For the first part of digestion, right? We haven't gotten to the next parts, but identify the major elements of digestion in its first stages. Is there more about that? Yeah. Yeah, so we have a factual, a goal about the facts and the knowledge we want students to have. But the way we got about there means that we have another priority. And that is the very habit and skill of being able to see something, observe what's going on, and try to figure it out. If knowledge was our only goal in this lesson, we may have been at least tempted to start by saying, today, first graders, we're going to be learning about the digestive system. The first phase of the digestive system has several parts. There are parts of the mouth that are used, the teeth, the tongue, the saliva. The purpose of this goal is to break down food in order to prepare it for the stomach. I'll write this down. I'll hand out a worksheet for you, and we'll test it on Friday. I don't want to sit in that class. So the last thing I want you to think about on your own, we're not going to discuss it, what kind of lesson planning do you think that teacher had to do to create this lesson? Probably wasn't found in the standards, probably wasn't found in the textbook. Don't think it was found on Pinterest. So think for yourself, just for a moment, what kind of planning should my teachers be doing to come up with this experience? So the introduction, we're going to tease this out a little bit in our observation of that in thinking about how you introduce a new topic. If we're not just starting with the definition, if we're not starting with a worksheet, then how do we introduce something? How do we present an experience to students that will ultimately drive learning, but protect the curiosity of the process? A couple ways in which we think about this. We've been using this phrase, whenever we can, we put the thing itself right in front of them. We want them to see the thing at work. If we could, we were learning about the Grand Canyon, we would go to the Grand Canyon. We can't always do that, but when we can, we put the thing itself in front of students. And by the way, in classical education, this protects the accessibility of all students in their learning. When people say classical education is often, only for students who have access to certain background knowledge and certain information, this is part of what protects against relying on students to have certain background knowledge, because it says when we go to a unit, we will start with shared experience. We will start with something that everybody can access together. I'm not going to start my lesson by saying, well, who already knows about this topic? And so the kid who watches National Geographic every day after school is going to be with you, and the kid who didn't have that opportunity is lost. We're going to start with something that we shared together. So we observe the thing itself. We can't always observe the exact thing itself in the room. So is there a similar thing, right? A comparable thing that we could model for them so that they could see similar patterns and behaviors that they could apply to our first idea? And we go back to our music lesson, right? We started in some ways by observing the thing itself, by singing the song together, but also she remembered to say, now we've learned about quarter notes, right? We've learned about eighth notes. Got it. Wonder if there's a new note that we need. And can we use what we know about our old notes to apply our observation of this thing and what might be coming up? So previous knowledge, seeing something at work, and then using questions to push forward that new thinking. Here's some specific examples across the disciplines that we might use in the K-5. Math, history, science, grammar. Again, all areas where we want students to have concrete knowledge by the end. But what does it mean in each discipline to present to them a phenomenon for observation and experience? And again, school administrators, school leaders, as you think about the curriculum that you choose, what are the principles by which we choose our curriculum? Maybe we trust a great publisher. That's great. But what I want you to think about is how does this curriculum fit with our philosophy about human beings? How is it effective in that learning? And how does it honor who they are as humans? And that's why in our program, we use Singapore math, not because only Singapore math is tried and true in terms of being effective pedagogy, right? Nationally, and state test scores show that. But the reason why we chose Singapore math primarily was because it has a fundamental philosophy. It's called the CPA philosophy, concrete, pictorial, abstract. What it says is, as we develop a mathematical understanding and mathematical awareness, we will start, especially with the younger students, by moving concrete manipulatives around and getting a number sense. Here's what 1 looks like. Here's what 2 looks like. If I have 4, I can put them into 4 groups of 1. I can put them in 1 group of 4. I can put them in 2 groups of 2. Can we see that? Can we see the different ways in which we can do that? It starts with a concrete experience, a physical reality, that when I see 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 and 2 plus 2 end up coming to the same result. It starts with the experience and then moves to the abstract principle. That's why we chose our math curriculum. And so we try to see that pattern in each of our disciplines. How in history can we start by laying out for them a story of a people group who started a civilization? And then let's introduce to them another people group that started a civilization. Now, if I told you that weather conditions started to change and the water source moved from one spot right in the middle between the 2 people groups, wonder what would happen. If I start with a story and I set up that drama and we have that shared experience, my guess is you're going to start to pick up on the patterns of human behavior that tells us the next chapter that we are studying. You might give them a painting or an image to put them in the scene. In science, we saw the experiment at work that drove our learning, and even in something like grammar. Grammar, I would say in classical schools, is the most tempting place to walk into the classroom and say, today, kids, we're talking about adjectives. 7-year-olds, in all of your experience, have you ever had a word that describes a person, place, or thing? What if instead we started with a sentence, a beautiful sentence that we just learned in literature about the duck in the blue bonnet? And we said, oh, that was such a great story. Remember the duck in the blue bonnet? Can you picture that in your head? You see the bonnet. You know what a bonnet is. It was blue. Well, let me change that. What if I told you it was a red bonnet? What if I told you it was 3 bonnets? What if I told you it was a tall, fuzzy, purple, polka-dotted bonnet? Did that image change in your head? So I could put different words in front of the word bonnet, and it seems to give me more information about the thing. It seems to give me a lot of description. I wonder if there's a category of words that are describing words. Now that is an interesting lesson about adjectives. We start with a shared experience of something beautiful, and we just start to notice, how's that thing working? So how do we use then questions to drive the learning? We thought about our plan. We know our end goal. We want to think about our patterns. The teacher has thought about it for themselves. We've set up a great introductory lesson. We've introduced the thing. We have that shared experience. Now I want to move their learning along. And we know we want to do it through questions. Well, here's some things that we talk about often in the kinds of questions we want to ask our kids to move that learning, to drive that learning, to get them there. Again, let's go back to thinking about 2 possible pitfalls. On the one hand, some people say, okay, I got to ask a lot of questions. Great, I can do that. What do you know already about the topic? Which we said already is a pitfall, right? Because unless it's a shared experience, we've now divided the room into who's already learned about it and who hasn't, right? Unless that already is a shared experience, we want to be careful about recall questions. Recall questions are great if we've learned that material together. We can refresh, we can make sure that that material is on play. But if the student hasn't learned it yet, and you're asking these really particular, precise questions about content that they haven't experienced, it can become pretty frustrating. This becomes what we call a disguised lecture. You may have been in a classroom like this, where the teacher thinks I'm supposed to ask questions. What I really want to tell you is just what it is. And so I'm going to ask a fake question for you to guess the thing that's inside my head, right? And so you might have a teacher, this especially happens sometimes with vocabulary, where teachers are going through and they say, okay, we talked about food and the fact that it breaks down in the mouth, and it's next going to need to go to the stomach. And so we're going to need a pathway in order to get that there. So does anybody know what that's called? It starts with an E, esophagus. You just think, just give the word. Nobody knows it, except the one kid. So when we are looking for really specific information that there's no reason why they should have learned that in the past, we're going to create a frustrating experience for kids, right? So we don't want to be overly specific and pull something out that isn't there and make it a disguised lecture. But the other side of the pitfall is thinking, okay, wonder, philosophy. I know what I'll do. First day of third grade grammar, we're going to have a 45-minute discussion on what is the nature of language. Now, that's a great question. You should think about that question for yourself. But if we were going on a hiking trip with third graders and that was the question that you asked them, your kids are going to end up on opposite ends of the park with that question. It's way too big. There's way too many places for that to go. And they don't have a shared common experience to be able to try to answer that together, right? So that does not mean we jump into big, broad philosophical questions that isn't part of our shared experience. What we want to do is bring them into that shared experience and ask them logical questions about what they're seeing, what happened before, what happens next, what might be necessary from this thing. And so this one, let's go back to that esophagus answer, right? That idea. Let's say we're in that science lesson. We said, okay, we've had food. We broke it down in our mouth. We know that it's going to go to the stomach next. Is there anything, how are we going to get there? I wonder how we get this broken up food down to where it needs to go next. What might we need? If you ask that and then a student says, I don't know, we need something like a food pipe, that's a great answer. That is a great answer. That is logical. It makes sense. I've seen pipes work. It's for food. This is great. Encourage that. This is the kind of thing they go, okay, what's a logical answer to solve the problem that we have in front of us? Now later, we're going to label it esophagus. And I'm going to ask my kids to know that term and write it on a test and all of those things. But when they have the term esophagus attached to knowing we needed that food pipe thing, that sticks, that's sticky knowledge for them. Or you might ask a slightly broader question that say, look, there's a couple different ways in which we could get there. What are some things that we might need, right? And let the kids play it out, put some hypotheses on the table, and consider them. So as we ask questions, we prepare with the landscape of where we want to go. We have this depth of knowledge as a teacher. We narrow down to where we think we want to travel that day. We set up the shared experience. And then in conversation, we help lead students toward new understanding by observing, inquiring, discussing, landing on that answer, and then engaging in practice to solidify that understanding. So as we wrap up here, I know you all probably need a little bit of a break before we head over to tonight's keynote. I want to it's a 1-minute clip, and it's another science lesson. I want to just land on what is our ultimate goal for these kinds of lessons. We want them to know things, but there also seems to be other goals that we have. And these goals may not be reflected always in the pencil and paper test that we give to our students. We have more goals than just ones that can be captured by pencil and paper. One of those ways in which you might see an effective lesson is to go back and count the number of gasps students express during that science lesson. When there's that moment that I have so much agitation, right? I have an answer, I have an idea, I don't know what to do with this yet, but let's try it. I think we've got an indicator of a good lesson. But this pedagogy is dangerous. This pedagogy kind of creates kids that are really constant question askers, and that is their nature already. So let's just look at a clip to remind ourselves of what might happen. Again, 1-minute clip, pretty simple. This is the end of a science unit, and they have been studying the very basic ideas of DNA and the idea that our genetic code, our DNA makeup, is responsible for the physical characteristics that we have, right? So you notice different physical characteristics. That is kind of coded or hardwired in our DNA. It can affect hair color, eye color, things like that. We've gone through, we've learned the material, we're getting ready for the test, we're wrapping things up. But a student has a question that we will get to as soon as I get to my internet again. All right, this should work.
Sophie. Well, because it's not that I don't get it. It's just that, well, when you're talking about like our DNA, sometimes because I was born with it's black hair, but then it turns blonde.
Right.
And I didn't get that because usually, as you said, that Joy's DNA was that he's going to have brown hair. And I'm not that settled with that because I had black hair.
Yes, well, your hair can change color, and that can be in your DNA, and it can also be affected by outside sources, like the sun. But a lot of babies, that's typical, that a lot of babies are born with really dark hair, and then it lightens up over time.
All right, review. We've gotten to this idea, right? DNA determines physical characteristics, so it'll determine what hair color. Can't really change that. Probably gonna have it when you're born. Got it? Writing down, ready for the test? Wait a minute. You said, I'm just not that settled with that. I observed something, you said, and it's not fitting the pattern. An obnoxious, precocious, beautiful moment of exactly what we're going for. This is it. Yeah, we want our students to be able to answer questions that we ask them. You know why? Because we're training them to ask the questions we haven't asked yet. To walk out of the door, and when we've accomplished our learning objective, and they can name things about the digestive system, I want them to stop in their world, observe something, and say, wait a minute, I'm not that settled with that. My teacher has taught me this crazy habit of keeping to dig at things and try to understand the pattern of what's going on here. So if I observe something, I'm finding a new variable, new data piece, and I have got to figure out how that works. Yes, we have knowledge goals. Yes, we have certain skill goals of handwriting and things like that. But when we talk about our objectives, we talk about things we want students to know, things we want students to be able to do, and things that our students love. Those are the moments in the classroom that are going to be captured, that you know you are inspiring their delight in it. It takes a ton of planning. And might I add, you have to first start by wondering about the topic for yourself. Because by the way, that same precocious kid is going to walk into your classroom and ask you a question of something that is not on the lesson plan that day. So honor that by having done the research for yourself. You may not get to all that content knowledge, but you want to honor when that kid wants to go to a new place, turn around that new corner, and wonder about it. We want to honor the love that they already have for the world around them and their ability to reason and come to know that thing. So good luck, you all, with those processes. Thanks for sharing in this time with me.